we think that the presentation will be about 40 minutes.
Thank you all very much for coming. It's nice to see you. I'm glad you were able to make the time to come and be with us this evening. There are several reasons we decided to have this school safety forum, and it's unfortunate that events happen quite regularly that we see in the news almost on a daily basis that make us think about safety in a way that in certainly other generations perhaps was not necessary, not in the way it is today. We here at the Stoughton Public Schools have been thinking about the issue of safety of our buildings and our students and our staff and our entire community for quite a number of years now. And we have a lot of things in place that we thought it would probably be very interesting for you to know. And one of the things that we have initiated in lieu of just a plain, isolated lockdown policy is a protocol known as A.L.i.C.E. We introduced A.L.i.C.E. about 6 years ago. And at that time, with our friends from the Stoughton Police Department, a number of school personnel had a meeting somewhat like this in the middle school library. There were about 200 people there that night, and we got to discuss what A.L.i.C.E. meant, how we were using it, what it brought to us as a tool. But there have been many people who have come, joined the community since then. 6 years is a long time, and we've also had a lot more experience with it, and various other events have happened along the way. I also want you to know we have had, for many, many years, a district crisis team, and the crisis team meets regularly, consists of administrators, teachers, counselors, nurses, facilities people, police people, fire department, and we have put together a comprehensive emergency manual, which takes into account all of the things that we could potentially foresee happening, and then as things that we might not have thought of come up, we add them to that manual. Each of our buildings has a crisis team in the building. They are very well educated in a whole variety of procedures, and a couple of years ago, we instituted a position in the district, which is that of security supervisor, and I'm about to introduce David Gulia, who is one of our assistant principals at the middle school. He also fulfills the role of security supervisor. So he is in charge of our drills, he's in charge of our training for a whole variety of emergencies, and he will talk to you a little bit about that and about some other things as well. And the other part that I want you to know is in place. We have a very comprehensive threat assessment team, which is counselors, administrators, and nurses in our school system. And they have been trained, and we have actually hired people whose expertise is threat assessment of members of our community. So we're very, very glad that we have a team like that in place. And that's a very, very valuable resource. So there are many different aspects of things we can talk about. We have instituted some technological changes in the building to give us more control and sense of safety and tools that we can use. And I think at this point I'll just turn it over to David, and then we have a number of folks from the Stoughton Police Department who will also talk to you. And then we have a couple of microphones here, so at the end we'll open it up for questions for you. And then we'll do the best we can to answer any of those. Jean is recording. You're at Facebook Live, right? But will people be able to see the meeting later? Yep, they can see it now or later. And SMAC is recorded live. Okay, so you will be able to see it on SMAC, so you call it up online, or for friends or family members who you would like to get an opportunity to see some of the things that get said tonight and who are not able to be here, you can just tell them that they will be able to see the recording. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Izzy. So whenever you're planning a presentation like this, you think about, worst case scenario, like your audio visual going down or blank screen. So I'm just gonna get that set up. So welcome everyone tonight to our School Safety Forum. We are so happy to see you here today. There's a lot of friendly faces and people that we know in the community. Before I get going, I just want to introduce a few people to my left. and a few in the audience that are instrumental to our efforts here in Stoughton to keep our students, our staff, our community safe. To my left, we have Detective Kuhn. We have our school resource officers, Officer Isabel, Officer Bonda. We have Sergeant Hardy, former school resource officer. We have Officer John Gagney, who is a member of the regional SWAT team. We also have Lieutenant Carroll from the Stoughton Fire Department and Chief McNamara from the Stoughton Police Department. So the great thing in Stoughton is the people to my left, the people in the audience, there's a lot of institutional knowledge when it comes to school safety and the community. So it's very much to our advantage. I work at the middle school, but I also have the chance to visit all the schools when we're training our teachers and staff and talking to our students. And it's really an honor that I have. I'm from Stoughton. A lot of you probably recognize me from the soccer fields or baseball fields or whatnot. My kids go to Stoughton schools, and like many of you in the audience and many of the public safety personnel here that live in Stoughton, this is very personal for us when we're talking about school safety. Just a quick overview. We do want to give you a little bit of a history of school safety in Stoughton and how it's changed. We want to talk to you about our program, our A.L.i.C.E protocol, our threat assessment, and then most importantly, how you can help us as parents in the community. Some steps going forward, and then of course some time for questions and answers. We know everyone's schedules are busy. We would like to be done within the hour tonight, but we will hang back for questions. We're happy to do that at the conclusion of the evening. So I'm going to talk briefly about the history of school safety in Stoughton, and then I'm going to turn it over to Detective Kuhn, who is a former school resource officer who was instrumental in this whole process. This started for us a long time ago when we're thinking about school safety. In fact, the process started before Sandy Hook. We took a look at our procedures in Stoughton, and we knew there was more that we could do. And the A.L.i.C.E protocol and the A.L.i.C.E program was something that we learned about at the Norfolk District Attorney's. It was like a roundtable meeting or a conference that they had, and it made a lot of sense to us. There were not a lot of school systems in New England that were part of the program, but with the support of the school administration, central office, Dr. Izzy, Chief Chastity at the time, we went forward and we developed a plan. I'm going to have Detective Kuhn come up for a moment, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about the training that we went through and then the training that we implemented in the schools.
Good evening. How are we doing? It's kind of like a cop class, and everybody's really far back, and no one's really forward. It's very normal. So my name's Detective Kuhn. I'm currently assigned to the Day Shift Detective Division. I was a school resource officer here at Stoughton High for 3 to 4 years. What Assistant Principal Gulia has said, in addition to that, the Stoughton School has also done many other A.L.i.C.E trainings outside of the schools. We try to hit every phallus of where our children are. We've done the courthouse, we've done the Jones School, extended day, a couple nurseries in school. We've gone as far as private nurseries in school. We've done IKEA. We've done the cerebral palsy building located on Tech Drive. We've also done the fire department, some members of the town hall. Anyone I'm missing? The library, sorry. We also did the library. So we've tried to hit everywhere these children are, whether it's after school or before school or just in between. That way that it's standardized and it's consistent. So if everybody knows what they're doing, from the fire department to the teachers to the police department to the DPW, we've also done the DPW. If everyone's kind of on the same page of what we want to happen and how we want to happen, you're going to see that tonight, it's beneficial for all. That way it's less chaotic, even though it's an extremely chaotic event, unfortunately. We try to make it a little less chaotic if everyone's on the same page.
The training process, training our teachers, was a huge time commitment, and it was a process. We're training hundreds of teachers, we're training secretaries, we're training administrators. That took a significant amount of time. That would not have been possible without the cooperation of the Stoughton Police Department. When you're running these trainings with simunitions, you need to have 4 officers there helping out, being safeties. So the planning process of doing that at each school and then coming back and doing it is something that takes a lot of commitment and a lot of effort, and we're very grateful for that cooperative relationship that we have. The point that I want to make with this is, after events in Florida, as a parent, you always think, what are they doing in Stoughton? And we've had school safety nights before. In fact, I know a lot of you have been at those school safety nights. Some people haven't. And there are events that occur, whether it's Sandy Hook, or it's in Florida, or it's Columbine, that grab your attention in a different way, and they do that for us too. It makes us re-examine what we're doing. We're proud of what we're doing in Stoughton, but we know that we can always improve those procedures. So I'm going to go through A.L.i.C.E. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to go through it. This is a workshop that we used this fall. We went to all the different schools. This was just happened to be the middle school slideshow. I figured I would show all of you in the audience the slideshow that we go through with our schools and our teachers to explain the program. And so A.L.i.C.E. is based on a lot of research. It's based from research from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the research, they look at these active shooter events, these violent events, and they break it down. They create these huge reports, and they study how people reacted. And the piece of information from Virginia Tech is one that has always stood out to us, because what happened that terrible day at Virginia Tech was people reacted in different ways depending on where they were. Some people, when Cho got into that building, they didn't really do anything. They froze. And in places where people really didn't react or they froze, the casualty levels were dramatic. But in buildings, in rooms where people barricaded or jumped out of the windows or took other steps to save their lives, the casualties in those rooms were not as great. If you go through these situations, we always stress to people doing something is better than doing nothing. In a situation where there's an active shooter or it's a very violent event, as a human, you're going to only react in a few different ways. You're going to freeze, you're going to flee, or you're going to fight. So we don't want people to freeze. We want them to do something. And this is the mindset that we're trying to build with our staff that we want you to know about. When we drop our kids off at school, we're trusting those teachers and staff members to make life-changing, life-saving decisions. Doing something's better than doing nothing, and knowing your surroundings, that's something that we really stress to our teachers and our staff. So we're trying to build that mindset. So A.L.i.C.E., it's not linear. It's just a way to remember a procedure that we put in place in Stoughton. It stands for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. So the alert piece is just all about information. Information getting out to the people that need it. What we know, how it's going to get out there, whether it's going to be the PA or it's going to be people yelling it out in the hallway. Now, school safety 20 years ago, there were all sorts of code words and code green and code blue and code red. The problem is no one knows what those mean. There was a school out in California that if there was a shooter in the school, the code was, there's a bear in the swimming pool. That was their code. If you heard that, there's a bear in the swimming pool, you knew something bad was going on. Until one day they actually had a bear in their swimming pool in California. It was in Northern California. You can imagine the confusion. The school's calling the police department, saying there's a bear in the swimming pool. The police think there's an active shooter. Code words, they don't work. We want to use plain language with people. So that alert is, if we know there's a threat, we're going to get that information out to people so they can react. Lockdown. This is something that we do, and this is something that we practice, and this is a great starting point because lockdown gives you control. You can lock your door. You can get ready to react. You're making yourself a difficult target. In the barricade piece, our classrooms have got tables, they've got desks, they've got all sorts of heavy objects. We've shown our teachers how to use those to barricade their rooms. And they're a great protection. You can create an unbelievable barricade in about 30 seconds. And the kids can help you if you need them to, especially as you get older. And oftentimes the elementary classrooms, there's 2 or 3 adults in those rooms that can help, that are part of the training. This is the barricade piece. There's all sorts of creative ways that you can barricade. We go through this with teachers. We go into their classrooms. We study their layouts. Every school is different. The inform piece is just like the alert piece. This is information getting out, and it's empowering people. That is what we're trying to do. I would say the biggest thing that we're trying to teach people in our schools is doing something is better than doing nothing, and empowering teachers, staff members, anyone in the school to make a life-saving decision. Oftentimes these events, these violent events in schools are over within 5 minutes. And we do have school resource officers in the school, and the police are in the school all the time. But if they're not at that school and they've got to respond, the data shows us that these events can be over very quickly. So we've got to empower our staff to make good decisions. And the counter piece, I'm going to have Detective Kuhn come back up to talk to you about the counter piece, because this part of A.L.I.C.E does have a little controversy to it, but I think that Detective Kuhn will be able to explain it better than I can.
So the counter portion is always the most eye-raising portion of this entire training. I have a 5-year-old. I also have a 4-year-old. One's at the Jones and one's at the Gibbon School. Age appropriate, we think that the whole time. This counter portion, I'm not saying that my young son needs to run out into the hallway and try to, tackle that bad person, whoever that may be. That's not what we're saying at all. Unfortunately, the best way to look at this situation here is if something happened in front of you and it was almost a do or die situation, there are steps you can take to enhance your survivability. As you see on the slide behind me, it says 80% of all active shooters, police officer involved shootings, we miss a lot. The reason why we miss when we are being engaged by a bad guy is because we're going under lots of stress. Your body goes through a lot of physiological changes under that stress. As you can hear in my voice, I'm usually not that nervous, but that happens, right? So you get tunnel vision, you get hearing loss, which is called auditory exclusion. These things start to happen. But when we're on the range, we're hitting upwards of 100%, 90% on the range. Well, why? We're not under stress. We just had our coffee, we're relaxed, and then we go out and do what we need to do as far as training is concerned. But when you throw an actual person in front of us who is trying to kill us or shoot at us, we miss. And there's a reason for that, and that's because of stress. Well, the bad guy's a human too, and that bad guy or girl has the same stresses going on as their victims. So there are ways, one of the things we talk about is something called OODA loop. What that stands for, it's an acronym. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. One of the ways I usually explain it is if you had a coffee in front of you right now, you observe that coffee, you would then orient your body towards that coffee, you would decide what to do with that coffee, and then you would act upon it. I'm going to take a sip of this coffee. Well, the bad guy also does that when they are intending to shoot at a target, right? So the old way we used to say was get in the corner, shut the lights off, and just kind of wait for the police to come. Well, it's very easy to hit a target that's just sitting there. I'm sure everybody here can agree. So some of the methods we talk about is to disrupt that OODA loop. And how do we do that? Well, there's many items inside the classroom that you can use that's going to absolutely disrupt that person's ability to shoot accurately. Whether it's throw your cell phone, a book, staplers, anything that's in that room that's going to elicit a response to interrupt that OODA loop, just for brief seconds. That's all we're looking for here. If you can disrupt that OODA loop and you can swarm that person, again, age appropriate. I'm not saying my Gibbon School kindergarten is going to be doing this with his class, but age appropriate. If you're in a senior class or a junior class with a bunch of football players and hockey players and they disrupt that OODA loop and they can swarm that person and bring them to the ground, then that's something they may have to do. And it's unfortunate we have to talk about that today in society, but we're here. We're adults. We need to talk about it. So that's the counter portion of that. That's that, oh man, that person's in front of me. I need to now do something. What can I do? So we give teachers and students tools, not physical tools, but tools as a way of disrupting that person in some way or shape or form.
Thank you, Detective Kuhn. Our last part of A.L.I.C.E is the evacuate. This is a great strategy if you're able to do it. If a teacher, we tell teachers this all the time, based on the information they have or they don't have, they make a decision to evacuate the school, and they end up in downtown Stoughton and McDonald's with their class, that's a lot easier phone call to make than another one. Okay, so again, it's empowering teachers. If you feel that there's a threat that you need to that you're able to get away from that threat. Evacuate. So that's A.L.I.C.E, and that's what we train our teachers on, and A.L.I.C.E has been incorporated in hundreds, if not thousands, of school districts around the country. In fact, the A.L.I.C.E protocol is supported by the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Massachusetts Public Safety. So we chose wisely when we went with A.L.I.C.E. Department of Homeland Security has run, hide, fight. It's all the same sort of principle about doing something is better than doing nothing. So along those lines, something that we feel is very important is threat assessment. And this is where our institutional knowledge and our relationships with the police are so important. So threat assessment in Stoughton. Dr. Rizzi mentioned the threat assessment teams that we have and the crisis teams that we have within the buildings and in the district. We also have something called the Roundtable with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office. So our roundtable includes district attorneys, law enforcement, school leaders, counselors, and we're basically looking at different situations, and we're analyzing threats, and we're talking, and we're communicating, and we're being proactive. And over the years, this has been a very helpful thing to the Stoughton community. Are you going to hear about every time that we've communicated about a situation and dealt with it? You're not. Every now and then, some things make the news. About a month ago, we had a situation at the middle school where we had a couple of middle schoolers report some information about a threat that was made against a teacher in Brockton, which set off a chain of events in Stoughton and Brockton, and those students were found and dealt with in Brockton. But oftentimes, these things are happening a little off the radar, but it's something that you should know we do, and we've been doing it for a very long time. The relationship that we have with law enforcement cannot be understated. Our school resource officers, they build relationships with kids and families, and that's so important. It's so important if a kid's got some information they want to share, it's so helpful if they know that officer. And on the Stoughton Police Department, we have, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 officers at least that were former school resource officers. So they know the schools well, and they're around. So this is just a huge thing that we have. This is the most important message that I think we have tonight. We need your help. If you think about it, in our district, let's say we've got about 4,000 students, okay, and I'm just going to use rough numbers, 350 teachers. There are a lot more students and families than staff members. You know, or I hope you know what your kids are doing. We need that information. If you have a feeling that something just isn't right with your child or their friend, and they're posting something on social media, and you caught something, contact us. This happens all the time, and 90% of the time, it's not anything that we need to be concerned about, but we want to check that out. So trust your instinct as a parent. And the thing that we're emphasizing, and this is from the Sandy Hook Promise, is if you see something, say something. And we emphasize that to our students, but we also want to emphasize it to the parents and community members. If you see something that's alarming, don't assume that we already know about it. Don't assume that your kid is going to tell someone at school, okay? And if your child does tell you something, that can affect the school, please contact us as soon as you can. We do come across situations where kids will say, yeah, I told my mom and dad like a week ago, but, you know, I told them, and that's where the conversation ended. If you could just continue that conversation with us, we're really good about keeping things confidential. We have people email us all the time. They want to keep their names out of things. The social media, a lot of our problems do originate on social media. So we encourage parents to monitor that and be aware of that. And if we're talking about school safety, there are just some practical things that we like to remind you of for those in the audience and those on TV. The school drop-off, the school pickup, I know those are stressful times. I'm out at that middle school parking lot every day. Stoughton is a pretty condensed place. You know, the middle and high school, you got, you know, 2,000 kids being dropped off in a 20-minute time period on some streets that were designed 100 years ago. We appreciate people's patience out there. Slow down, stay off your phones, don't text, don't yell at the crossing guards or the teachers out there, or the assistant principals. But really, practical safety is very important, and that seems like a no-brainer, but we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that to you. And we want to give you some resources tonight before we open it up to questions and answers. I'm mindful of how much I'm talking, and I usually don't like to talk this much for this long, but we do have some information for you. So this is from Kathy Buschenfeld, one of our guidance counselors at the Daw Elementary School. And I have a handout tonight that you're welcome to have as you leave. But I think as parents, you struggle about how to talk to your kids about these events on the news. I know I do. And there are some really good tips that we have here from the National Association of School Psychologists. So I'm just going to briefly go over those, but this again will be in a handout for you. Whenever there's a violent event, whether it's in a school or just around the world, reassuring kids that they're safe is so important. Step one. The next step is making time to talk to them and answering the questions that they may have. Sometimes those conversations happen at the least likely of places. I know with my kids, sometimes they need to be a little distracted before they talk to me at all. My son's probably a little bit more likely to talk to me if he's throwing a football or playing soccer or something like that. And then we have recommendations on developmentally appropriate conversations, elementary, middle, and high school. Obviously, you're dealing with a high school student, there's more that you can say and there's more that they know. Review safety procedures that you have in school or at home. Closely monitor your child's emotional state. The other recommendation is limiting television viewing of these events. I think that's particularly important for younger students. By middle and high school, they know more than we do sometimes about different events, but I don't know how in-depth you need to go with your first or second grader at home about violence. That's a choice that you're going to make as a parent. And then maintain a normal routine and, again, reassuring them that they're safe. So those are some suggestions. I'm going to leave this right up here for parents. And then we have some upcoming events. We have internet safety nights that we run. We have one coming up in the spring in cooperation with the Stoughton Police Department. We also have a parent workshop on social and emotional skills. Sorry, I dropped that paper. So that night we think will be very well attended. And it's going to be a follow-up to the school safety night. We're going to be sponsoring a workshop in the fall called Integrating Development of Social Emotional Skills into Your Parenting. It's going to be led by Jane Harden. She's a faculty member of Simmons College and co-author of the book Social Emotional Learning at Home. The presentation will be geared toward parents and guardians of children and teens from pre-K to grade 12. We think that this is going to be a great resource for parents, so look for more information about that program. So that's what we have. We are going to allow some time for questions and answers. We have microphones set up. I would like to thank Stoughton Media Access Corporation, otherwise known as SMAC, for taping this event tonight, and I believe it's being shown live. So, but we anticipate questions, and we're happy to answer questions. Obviously, in terms of specific cases or students, we have to be mindful of student confidentiality, but we will do our best to answer questions that you may have. So if you've got a question, if you could just come on up to the microphone, and I'll take a step back.
Hi. How often do you run these drills with the kids?
Yeah, so we typically, our goal with A.L.I.C.E drills and lockdown scenarios with kids is we wanted to make them like fire drills in the school. So a fire drill happens quarterly, so that's our goal for lockdown drills.
Okay. All right. And then my next question is, being proactive with our brand new, beautiful high school, do we have anything in place that we don't have in this school, whether it be bulletproof doors or maybe shorter windows on the doors, or windows that will knock out that they could get out that way?
The short answer is yes, and let me give you a little bit of an amplification on that. There are numbers of committees meeting to talk about all of the various different furniture and accoutrements and technology and the building materials and so on. There's an entire safety team that's working on all of the safety features of the building, including the kinds of glass, windows in rooms, so that every room has a window that can open that you could get out of, the design of the offices as they have proximity to the doors. So there's a great deal of thought going into that, and we have a lot more knowledge, unfortunately, based on experience than we had when, say, this building was built or any of our buildings were built. Although we've done some very considerable retrofits on buildings to make the buildings that we have safe. I'm not going to talk about what the specifics of some of those things are, because we believe that there are certain things that really shouldn't be broadcast to give people an opportunity to figure out how to defeat them. But I can tell you that there are many, many hours being spent by the design team, the architects, the owners, project manager, our facilities people, and public safety people looking at the design of that building so that every feature is as safe as it can be, given a balance with having to make it an environment that is a pleasant learning environment. So ideally speaking, if safety was the only thing you had to worry about, then you would build a school that would look like a prison and had no windows at all. But there's a balance there that we want to find. But this building will have features in it that you are not used to seeing in the schools that were built previous to the last 5 years.
Great. Thank you.
Why? My son asked me the other day, he said, "Mom, I heard the president wants to arm the teachers." And then he asked me, "Mom, are the teachers going to start bringing guns to school? So what should I say to him?" Because this is a debate now, sir.
No.
Massachusetts, right now, it's illegal for a teacher, even with a permanent license to carry, to bring a weapon into school. The only people allowed are law enforcement in Massachusetts currently.
How are temporary staff members and substitute teachers trained in this protocol?
Yeah, so in Stoughton, besides the teachers that you have an enormous amount of staff, paraprofessionals, substitute teachers, and sometimes your substitute teachers change. Like sometimes after the college semester is over in May, you have new substitute teachers that come in. So it is a challenge to make sure that everyone's trained and everyone's got the knowledge that they need. We do have resources for our substitute teachers, and we do offer this training after school. When we come into schools, we have the entire staff in front of us. But people that are substitute teachers, paraprofessionals, we do run workshops for them, and it's part of our training program. We're constantly looking to update and improve that program, though.
On election days, when the schools are wide open to anybody any voter who doesn't have to show ID who can walk in, are there additional steps that go into place on those days when the schools are open and the school could be potentially vulnerable?
So I will have to say that election days are not my favorite day. It is very concerning to us that we have voting in the schools and that the schools are open, as you have said. And we have people, and Ms. Jardin, who's the principal of the Gibbons School, has spent many, many, many hours as a community member working on that issue and the possibility of at some point moving voting away from the schools entirely. Having said that, there is we've moved the November day, the big election day, school is closed now, so that we just don't have to deal with that issue, and we do professional development that day. And many other districts have gone to that model for the same reason that we have, and then what we can do is combine with different districts to do professional development, so that's helpful. When we have the local elections, like we'll be having one in April, there is a police officer to guard every poll. So while they're not assigned as a guard for the building per se, there is an officer there. And there is a very heightened level of awareness amongst our staff, administrators, and secretaries to know that people are coming in the building, to watch people, to make sure that to get from the door to the poll and back again, there's never a time when people are not being able to be observed. When the time comes that we can change that, we will all feel comfortable about it. And one of the things that we're very cognizant of is the moving of cars around outside, because I know we have not had this issue here, but in other communities, the danger has been from people driving cars and losing control of them. So we keep an eye on the traffic patterns, and we do have a very heightened awareness. It is not ideal from our point of view to have those buildings open when we have elections.
I have a kindergartner. Could you just walk through a little bit like what they're exposed to during a lockdown drill?
Sure.
So something that we don't want to ever do is we don't want to traumatize through training. That's something that our police department talks about a lot. So that is very much on our minds. We have always run these drills with that in mind. During a lockdown drill, we'll come in, I'll come in with a school resource officer or a police officer or a combination of both. The school will go into lockdown, and we're really checking to make sure the classrooms can be secured and locked in a timely fashion and teachers are getting ready to react. The drills themselves are usually about 2 minutes, I would say. We're able to get around the schools, especially the elementary schools, pretty quickly to check. Sometimes we'll email possibly a scenario to the teachers to think about, but during the lockdown drill, we encourage teachers to talk to kids about why we do drills, lockdown drills and fire drills, and it's all about keeping them safe, and we emphasize to the kids that they've got to listen to their teachers and follow instructions, especially at the kindergarten level. So we try to reassure them that we're safe. And our goal with lockdown drills and school safety drills is like with fire drills. I'm going to use that as a comparison. Fire drills have always happened. And when they happen, they're not really a cause of stress for kids. They're just part of that's our goal. That's been our goal, and I think we're pretty far along that process in Stoughton. It's just what we do, but that's the goal. And we heard from parents about communication, and it's something that we're going to really concentrate on, is that whenever we do a lockdown drill or a school safety drill, we're letting you know. Honestly, it's become so much of what we do that I don't know if every time we did one, we let parents know. But we've heard that from the community, and when we run one of those, we'll let you know. So you can have that conversation at home.
I'm short. Many of these active shooters have been former students, so potentially an active shooter in Stoughton could have participated in the A.L.i.C.E program. How are you guys prepared for that? Because if they do the training, like a fire drill and everything, you know, they're aware of what everyone's going to do, how do you counteract that?
I'll answer that. The best part of A.L.I.C.E is that we've taught the staff to do something. So even being a former student or being trained in A.L.I.C.E, you don't know what that teacher or that classroom is going to do. I've been involved in the schools. I was assigned to the schools from 2000 to 2015. And I can tell you in those 15 years, there's been so much change. When I first started, Columbine era, we would wait for 4 officers in the town of Stoughton to show up at a high school before we entered. We would form what is called a diamond formation. 1 in the front, 1 in the back, and 2 on the sides. And we would go down hallways and check, okay? That is absurd in a town like Stoughton, where 4 officers may be the only 4 that are on the street. So you may be waiting for somebody who's coming from Target, Ames Pond, someone in Stoughton Center, and someone from the station. But to answer your question, now the first officer gets in the building. Hopefully, an SRO or somebody's already here, okay? And our job is to go in and eliminate the threat, not to deal with medical issues or whatever the case may be. It's to go in to eliminate the threat. In the training that has changed, now we're teaching staff members, if you're in the E building of the high school and there's a problem in the A building, evacuate. Go. Why should the E building be waiting, like when I first got here in 2000, for everybody to huddle in the corner and wait for the good guys to come? Sometimes it's too late by the time we get here. But in a community this size, you are fortunate that the police station is close. Our people are out on the road. We have people assigned to the schools. But to answer your question, you don't know what that teacher's going to do, where that teacher's going to be. He or she may have already evacuated. They may have gotten to groups in other classes. We do training all the time with just the staff. We may stay at the West School late one Wednesday night or an early Thursday, and we lock the whole school down. We put signs up. We come in with Officer Gagney and some SWAT members. We blow blanks, shotgun rounds. The teachers, we get them to understand where the shot's coming from. You know, if you hear it coming from here, don't run towards there. Evacuate this way. We use the PAs. The schools have been, to answer the first question about the high school, we've been involved in that, the new high school, but even like going and doing drills, say the Gibbon School, if you can't hear the PA somewhere, that's something we address and try to fix. So we're constantly looking at things and trying to adapt. So hopefully that answers your question.
The other side to that is that all the officers are trained and understand A.L.I.C.E of what we train our officers to do. It's a different approach to any type of event that happens like this. So if you have a former student that was A.L.I.C.E trained, he still doesn't have the training that the officers that are on scene have.
We just did a huge training. There's a large number of us that just did a huge training with the FBI. We're there for a week. It's active shooter training from their perspective and how to do different tactics in different situations. A one-person response. So it was me going and clearing the whole building by myself, and then my backup meets up with me later. Like, how do I do that? We get training from a bunch of different agencies and you know, use that in different ways in our department and train everybody in our department. We train every year, 1 to 2 times a year on active shooter situations, just that. And that's along with the school, but just as a police department, we train specifically on that at least twice a year. Big and like large scale.
2015, we did a huge training with the fire department. In the schools, we brought some kids in as volunteers, some of the football players. We put them in makeup, phenomenal makeup, I might add. And we put wounds on them. And then when we got the building to almost secure, the fire department came in and triaged people. So we work with them, we work with the schools. You're in good hands in the town. I'm proud to say that I live in this community, and I'm proud that the people that put the effort in to make sure that, like you, my kids are safe.
When we do these drills in mostly the elementary schools, I'd say that's where a lot of people have questions. Well, my kids get scared, or what happens if, you know, they say something at home? How do I react to that because they're nervous? Well, I can assure you, when Officer Bonnet and I go in, I know specifically us because we're usually together. If there's a teacher or a child that we see that have questions or concerns, we're going into that classroom to speak to that
So for fire drills, there's a fire alarm that goes off. So what happens, like I have a third grader, and so of course he never tells me anything. So, I know. So what happens when there is an active shooter drill that you guys, I mean, I'm thinking really of the elementary age, but is there an alarm that goes off? Is there an announcement? And if there's an announcement, I would assume it comes from the principal's office. And what happens, or what's the contingency plan if for some reason the principal's office is the office that's breached first?
Great question, but the alert can be anything. It could be a gunshot, it could be gunfire, it could be a PA, it could be you saw something coming through the door. So we teach the staff to adapt to that.
We also have a crisis team in each building, and there are roles that are assigned, and then there's a hierarchy of roles. So if a person becomes incapacitated or unavailable, there's a person in that school that's going to take over that role. We have done numerous tabletop drills with the plans of the schools, with the crisis team that manages that school. So we'll go in and we'll put the plans in front of everyone and then say, this is a scenario. You who are all in the crisis team, how would you manage that? Then this thing happens and this thing happens. So they run through a whole variety of scenarios, some of which have some very, very unpleasant parts to them that deal with the kind of things that you're talking about.
I also want to add, A.L.I.C.E isn't just a school model. These things are happening literally everywhere. More often than not, I just looked at FBI statistics before I got here. These happen more often in just areas of commerce, office buildings, large areas, large events, obviously what happened in Vegas. These tactics that we're teaching, it's just good to talk about in general. I have a kindergartner. We're not talking about those types of things yet, and I train this, so I understand your frustration, but there is going to be a time where I'm going to have that conversation. And A.L.I.C.E was born out of that. After Columbine, the person that invented A.L.I.C.E, his wife was a school teacher or a principal, and he was a SWAT operator. So obviously that's two different ends of the spectrum, and that's how it all kind of came to fruition, because what we used to do was stay in the corner, and what all the cop kids were being told was absolutely not. Get suspended, get expelled, you're going to do this, this, and this. Well, if it's okay for my kid, why is it not okay for your kids? And that's where this whole thing kind of came from. So if everyone kind of, unfortunately you have to have that tactical mindset, and we're not trying to build soldiers here, we're not trying to do that at all. But if you're aware of your surroundings and you're not in your cell phone all day, walking through a mall and you hear a sound, that first thing that happens is denial. First thing everyone does, deny. They're like, oh, what was that? I don't know. If a round went off right now, everyone in here right now would look at the police officers and go, what are they going to do? What are they doing? Really, you guys would look at us, and the next thing is acceptance. You're all going to look at each other and go, that wasn't anything. And then there's that actual decisive action of going, well, we need to do something now. If you saw me and all the officers run, you're probably going to run, right? And what we're trying to say is we want you guys and your children to have that mindset, to be that leader, to say, hey, something happened, I need to do something. We don't really care what it is. Really, nothing is wrong in this situation. Whether you run out the window and break the window and leave, we got insurance, we'll pay for it, that sort of thing. So everybody kind of understand this is not just school related. This is not just a school problem, it's everything, unfortunately.
So say you have an active shooter in the building. Now the PA system is blown out. Does everybody have walkie-talkies? Like, how are you communicating with these teachers?
So one thing we don't want to, we try to stress to the teachers, we don't want a crutch, and that crutch would be a PA. Oftentimes when we do training, principals and vice principals got really good at running back to that area and using the PA, and then we shut it off on them. Well, some days we were there and the cameras didn't work, and the PA didn't work. Well, the alert can literally come from anywhere. So like I just said, if a round went off right now, everyone would have to think of doing something. This is not a step-by-step process. This is not a, okay, next I do this, next I do that, next I do this. It's not that way. It's, if I'm in this room now and I'm aware of my surroundings, how the doors open, do they open out, do they open in, that sort of thing, I then can take off into there, I can run out to that room here and just know my exits, sort of just like if a fire was over there. So if the PA is out, the teachers can talk together, right? They could say, hey, listen, we heard something over here, barricade here, that sort of thing. Does that kind of answer your question?
Well,
So
do
there's
they
no like,
have walkie-talkies? Can they, how are they communicating to actually find out? I mean, okay, if you hear it or whatever, and you
Yep.
can deal with it that way, but now everybody's in lockdown, and
so there is an all clear process that we use, and one of the things we teach is when that teacher feels comfortable. So if I knock on that door and I say Detective Kuhn, and they don't know who I am and they don't feel comfortable, then don't open that door until you feel comfortable. I have no problem with doing that. I don't care if you want me to shove my badge underneath the door, or if you until you see blue lights outside. It's all dependent on that teacher. One thing we try to avoid, sometimes schools were developed almost like the military. A kid had a bloody nose, they were in the kitchen, downstairs. It would go through everybody till it got to the principal to say, hey, let's call an ambulance for that person, right? Because that's kind of how it was always structured that way. It's not like that now. A student could dial 911 and say, hey, we think there's an active shooter. We don't have to then go through this chain of command.
Right.
So the way this model works is it works whether it's out in the football field, it works whether it's in an auditorium, and it works whether you're in a classroom. Does that kind of answer your question? There's no one answer for that. There's no, hey, we're on a walkie-talkie, we're on a social media. It could be social media. You could very easily see myself or Lieutenant Bonney, who runs the social media on the Stoughton Police Facebook page, write a quick, do not come to the Stoughton High School. You know, there are ways. During the bomb threat, if you remember a while back, a lot of that was on social media immediately. Kids are going to text. Kids are going to text all of you.
Right.
And the last thing we want is everyone coming to us. We're already dealing with a chaotic scene, and then we have Sandy Hook. One of the biggest problems there was ambulances. They could not get ambulances because so many parents were showing up, and they were blocking the way of people that needed to be there at that time.
I will say one thing, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail about what these enhancements are, but there's a lot of technology available now, and when we look at the buildings and what works and where the holes are, there are a lot of different systems you can use now for communication within a building that are not the old-fashioned wired PA, and we have addressed those things.
Explain a little bit more about what exactly is happening during the lockdown drill with the kids. I mean, we're calling it a lockdown. We're showing pictures of like barricading the doors, but then at the same time, we're saying the teachers are being told to evacuate if you need to. Are these kids sitting in a room, hunched down in a corner during a drill? Are they evacuating? Are they doing a combination?
And Dave, you can add it, obviously. So the drills that I'm talking about, like after school, early Thursday, with ammunition and blanks and everything else, teaching the teachers of the sound of, that's not with students. But there are drills at the high school, at the middle school where students are involved, and there are lockdowns at the elementary where students are involved. They do predetermined evacuation drills to certain sites where the teachers know, okay, this information's been put out. For the high school, we're going evacuating to the middle school. So they do drills. The average lockdown drill is usually done just to assess the building to see if all the rooms are locked. Did all the teachers hear the information? Usually the teachers hear a PA, lockdown, this is a drill, or whatever the case may be, and then the officers and the administrators will walk around and check doors. And just assess, well, this door is open. Well, during this period, you locked your front door, but there was no teacher in the room adjacent to you, so an intruder could get in through that way. So it's kind of like sometimes it's assessment phases, other times they're predetermined drills where certain rooms will evacuate.
At the elementary level, they're evacuating, or are they punched in a corner?
Yeah, at times they do evacuate. Not in a running like, you know, shots fired and we're all running out the building. But the staff is kind of aware more than the students of what is actually taking place. Does that make sense to you? So we're not, like, the police don't walk in with Dave Gooley and go lockdown and then blow a blank in the lobby and then watch everybody run out the building. That's not what we're trying to do. We do that with just the staff on night drills or early Thursdays sometimes, that type of thing, just so they can assess hearing where things are coming from. Not always relying on the crutch, of the PA of saying there is a lockdown. Just a little synopsis of Sandy Hook. One of the best things that came out of Sandy Hook was the problem started in the office. And what happened was they went to hit the PA, and the PA stayed open. So other parts of the building said, wow, that doesn't sound, it's gunfire, it's something. And then they addressed it saying, wow, the problem is where? We know where that is, where it's coming from. What do we do? How do we get out of here? So we're training the staff to acknowledge that, to kind of make that decision. Most drills, they will lock down, they'll shut off the lights, and they will go to that corner of the room that's safe from gunfire and assess. They may pull the shades. They may, if the threat's outside, and we do training of that. If the threat's outside, what should they do then? So it's very fluid. It's not like there's only one answer for everything. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I just kind of want to know from a kid's perspective what they're seeing or being told to do. Because I have a third grader, and she said I don't get.
Yeah. So a lot of times they will get the lockdown, and the teacher may put them in the corner of the building, the corner of that classroom. They may jump over to another classroom. They all have the adjacent door. So that's up to that teacher. But then they're waiting for more. They're assessing the situation. And sometimes at the higher levels, there may be a situation where they're telling them, this is a training exercise. And believe me, I have a 10th grader. My daughter comes home with anxiety because of it, but I tell her, hey, it's real life. We've got to do this. So they tell them there's an intruder, it's a training exercise. That will be instilled. And then they make decisions based on that. Whether or not like I said, I'll just use the example. The intruders in the A building at the office. The E building should not be in the building. They should be already at McDonald's. I'll take the phone call from my kid at McDonald's. Dad, come pick me up, gladly, rather than, trying to assess where he is in here. I hope that kind of answered it a little better.
Brought up a point. What should parents do? Because I work from home, maybe a mile from where my daughter goes to school, and you're saying, I'm guessing you don't want parents rushing to school. Is there anything that the parents should be known to do?
Great question. We do not want you to rush to the school. Officer Kuhn, Detective Kuhn brought up a great point. Sandy Hook, they couldn't get ambulances in. Part of that was the police response. Police cars were just coming and parking one after one, blocking the road. So the access road, the lifeline to that school, was disturbed with traffic. Obviously, let the good guys get there. The fire department's going to need apparatus. They're going to need ambulances. They're going to need to assess things. Law enforcement from all over the place is coming. When we do these training exercises, we're thinking of staging areas. We got to put out, and we do these exercises. There would be a social media or reverse 911. Where to pick up your child. It may be CVS parking lot. It may be, you know what I mean? So look for those social media things, but don't go to the scene. There's more than likely you're not getting in, and if you are, you could be obviously thought of as the bad guy, go running through the school. And I know you want to do that because your kids are here, but, have faith the good guys are coming. We're trying to eliminate the threat, and hopefully we'll be picking up your kids somewhere else. It may be in a situation that happened here before with the bomb threat. I believe we put everybody down at the middle school, and the buses picked up from there, if I remember correctly. So we assess that stuff. That's social media. That's reverse 911. We'll give you that information. But don't come to the scene. It's just going to bottlenecks everywhere, and that's the problem. Yeah, so in some of these exercises, we bring the DPW in as well. We'll have trash trucks come, block roads, put detour signs up, and train with us and say, listen, we don't want, the only thing coming down here is emergency vehicles. So they may take a trash truck, we'll take them off of their route. They'll block Pearl Street, for instance. So coming towards the problem, you're only going to be part of the problem. But I know it's hard being a parent because I tell my daughter I'm going to rappel out of the ceiling whenever something bad happens, so don't worry, I'll be here. But so I'm a parent too, I get it.
What's the policy for, we live in the world of Amazon with people delivering packages, and someone might see a bunch of people, like a person delivering packages, like UPS or whatever. Do they just automatically gain access to the school? Because that person could be posed as like a friendly person that could, just trying to gain access.
you have to buzz and be buzzed in to any of the buildings now, and the secretaries can see and speak to anyone before they make a decision to let them into the building. And in the case of a lot of our regular deliveries, we have a regular person, but they get an opportunity to assess and speak with the person through a microphone before they even let them in. So there's nobody, with the possible exception of Election Day, just walking into a building that has not had at least a preliminary conversation with someone before a decision's made that it's okay to let them in.
Just to follow up on that, I was at the middle school today, and I buzzed in, and I was let right in, so there was no preliminary conversation. So I'm just wondering, what training do all of the office staff have if you were saying that they're speaking to whoever's at the door prior to being let in? That's not necessarily the case. So is there a camera there? Are they seeing the person? What steps are being taken before that person is let in?
So the ability to talk to people outside, each school has that. Oftentimes, when you get buzzed in, we have cameras. We have a lot of cameras at the middle school. So, for example, when you were coming in to the school today, there's a camera. There are cameras right on that area. So our secretarial staff watches those cameras. They watch you come in. And also in our building, we've got a school, aside from Officer Bonder, our school resource officer, we have a school security officer, Mr. McNamara. He's actually here in the crowd right now. So our eyes are on that front door at all times, and we have a big screen camera. These schools were built, some of them 50, 60 years ago. It's not how we would build a school today. Some schools, the entranceways are a little bit more challenging. So that means that our secretaries and our building administrators and our teachers have to be very vigilant. That's why you'll see people in the hallways with IDs, and you may get questioned if you're in the school by a teacher. But we do have eyes on you as you're coming in.
And just one follow-up question. You've spoken a lot about evacuations and potentially meeting at McDonald's or CVS. Do each of the schools have an off-campus evacuation plan, and are all the students made aware of that plan?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that, and then if anyone from the police department wants to jump in. Reunification points are always part of the planning process, but every situation is different. So if something happened at the high school, like Sergeant Hardy was talking about a bomb scare that we had or a bomb threat, the middle school was the point that the high school students went to, but that was that situation. Every situation is different, but we have places in mind, and that's part of the planning process.
Okay, thank you.
This way, the people who watch the tape later will know the question.
Sure. Yes, many kids stay after school for after-school program, and there's not many personnel, right? So what are the protocols in that case?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The schools are busy places. At the secondary level, it starts at 7, and if your kids are involved with extracurricular activities or sports, it can go later at night. After school activities, there are teachers, there are administrators in the building. We train our people and our teachers on how to respond and react to situations. So in terms of supervision, whenever there's a program being run, there's got to be a plan in place on who's watching those kids and who's responsible. At the middle school level, most of our activities are done by about 4 o'clock, so there's administrators, often our SRO in the building. But we are thinking about all those activities, and we're thinking about weekend activities and games. It's a lot to think about.
First, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody being here tonight. It's been very helpful. We've heard the term A.L.I.C.E. and we've heard the term lockdown, but we haven't heard anything about shelter in place. What's the difference between shelter in place and lockdown?
That's a great question. That comes up a lot because we hear those terms being used interchangeably, but they're not. So shelter in place or secure in place is, a school would go into shelter in place or secure in place if there were, say, a medical emergency and you had to get a stretcher in and you didn't want kids in the hallway, or a staff member had a medical emergency. That's shelter in place. Shelter in place is like a lower level of threat. It's a situation where the teachers will lock their doors and they'll continue teaching. Lockdown is a serious situation, and that's how we train our people. Shelter in place is more for, the best example I can say is a medical emergency. Or if there were a bank robbery in town and the police said, you know what, go into shelter in place where we've got an active situation.
Because sometimes you'll get an email sent home that there was a shelter in place today in school, and just so that people realize that it's not quite as serious as a lockdown.
Exactly. We'll oftentimes send an email home to parents just saying that there was a shelter in place, just because we don't want kids to come home and say there was, they'll call it a lockdown, they'll say there were fire trucks and police officers, and they'll, so we do try to send that information out. Yeah. Shelter in place happens pretty frequently around the district. There are all sorts of situations that come up where you need to just get kids out of the hallway for a short period of time.
Thank you very much for coming out, all of you. If you have one more question, we can certainly take it. A lot of us will stay around if you want to ask us questions individually. I definitely would like to extend my deep thanks to our Stoughton Police Department, not only for coming tonight, which you see that there's a tremendous presence. That presence indicates an amazing support and relationship that we have with them, and it is really, there are certain things about Stoughton that are spectacular and real gems, and I think the relationship we have with our police department and what they are able to do for us is extraordinary and something that not everyone enjoys. I also want to thank the members of my team who came out. We have a number of principals here, administrators, a couple of members of the school committee who have been extremely supportive to us over many, many years in terms of all the preparations, providing money in the budget, things to help us to make sure that we're in the best possible place that we can be. And thank you all for coming as well. So did you have one more question you wanted to ask before we depart? If you would come to the microphone, that would be helpful, because then people at home will hear you.
Sorry. So one of the recent shootings, they used the fire alarm, pulled it to get people to come out towards them. So how do you, when a fire alarm goes off now, what are the kids being instructed? I mean, obviously, first thing that we would be taught previously is get out. Now there's the thought that we could be going out for the wrong thing. I mean, how are we handling that?
So this type of tactic has happened before. Jonesboro, Arkansas, they actually pulled the fire alarm. People exited the building, and then they shot from outside of the school. The easiest way I can answer that, ma'am, is we can't train for everything. All we can train for is the most likely event. I know that's not the best answer. A lot of times, I mean, when we did a class in here, I had kids asking me, what if a nuclear bomb went off? What if a helicopter crashed here? You know, stuff like that. We just can't train for everything. I would say that it's a chaotic event anyways, and when you add the additional stress of everyone kind of lackadaisically walking out because it's a fire drill, it's an absolute issue. It's a nightmare scenario. It's exactly what that is. I don't really have an answer for that. It's just, if that happened and we could then still put out that this is a lockdown, this is a serious event, the A.L.i.C.E model would still work. People would start to barricade, people would start to evacuate in a faster manner as opposed to just a regular fire alarm. I hope that answers your question a little bit. It's just, it's a very dynamic event, and there's a reason why bad people do bad things, and they learn from things. And that's why the A.L.i.C.E model works. Like someone asked earlier, you can't just learn these tactics. This is individual people making individual decisions based on what their feeling is. We're empowering them to make a decision. I can't get in everyone's brain and say, this is what I'm going to do under this stressful event. And that's kind of the beauty of this. We don't say, you do this, you do this, you do this. We say, you do what you think you need to do, given the population of your students, given whatever you have in front of you. You're the leader. You're the leader of that class. and individual leaders too. Students sometimes become leaders in these situations. So,
just add one thing to that. Our crisis team, our district-wide crisis team, meets after every single major event that happens, that makes the news, or anything that happens here in Stoughton. And it's unfortunate that the horrific things that are happening, they do evolve. And as they evolve, we meet and we discuss them and we try and evolve with them. So we're quite aware that things could begin to happen that have not happened yet, and then we will look at them and we will look at them all as a team. We will look at what resources we have, and we will try and adjust our plans, which are very fluid, so that we will address the new things that come along. I mean, I don't know, some of you remember in the 60s and 70s, it was people hijacking airplanes, taking them to other countries, and everyone would get off, and that was awful, but it doesn't compare with some of the things that are happening now. And we don't know how the situations will evolve, but we do have a process that we use to address them as they do evolve. So thank you all. We'll stay here if you want to talk to some of us. Thank you.
We also have that handout, if you'd like that handout about how to talk to your kids about violent events. It's right up here.